Hi, Joseph. How are you doing?
Hi, Natalia. How are you?
I'm good. I'm trying to stay cool. I went out this
Yes.
morning. I was drenched in sweat because I had to go do a showing at 11, which isn't even that late, but it was still super hot. So I feel better being inside the AC.
Yes. 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 I think it's over 100 today.
Yeah, it's crazy. So I'm excited to talk to you today, introduce you to my network. We want to talk about home inspections.
Yes. Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Yeah. So do you want to share a little bit about your company, the name of your company?
Sure. My company is GCJ Home Inspections. I got started a few years ago with it. Actually, my wife, who is a real estate agent, Katrina,
I love her.
she, thank you. She introduced me to it. And for me, it was almost like a natural, I guess, progression because um, obviously as a kid, my father was very handy around the house. And, you know, as a kid, we're doing plumbing, heating, like building, I don't know, rooms and framing stuff. So as a kid, you don't realize what you're learning until when you're older. I was a kid, so I didn't really want to be doing that stuff. I wanted to be playing. And as I got older, I found a job with the MTA, being a track inspector. So a track inspector is kind of similar to a home inspector. I'm walking miles of track, um, and seeing problem areas. Like as in
Right.
home inspection, um, your main concern is when a buyer is buying a house, they don't want to buy a house and come 1 week, a month, 6 months. They don't want to go spend 5, 10, $15,000 on, say, a roof or a central air conditioning unit or an HVAC system. So as a home inspector, I go into a house and I could give you three different levels where it's if it needs to be fixed right away, this particular item, if it needs to be fixed within the next 5 years, or if it needs to, if anything over that. And obviously, if there's any safety issues. So, as a home inspector, you first go into a house and you check out the roof. The roof, certain houses, depending on the size of the house, could go for over $10,000 if you have to rip everything up. And so as a new home buyer, a lot of people are buying. This is a big purchase for them. They're not just buying a pair of shoes, so they don't want to sit there and have to spend now another $10,000 on top of the, say, 500,000 that they just spent.
Right.
So I try to give them a heads up, saying that this roof is good. It should last for approximately 10 to 15, 20 years if it's brand new, or this roof is pretty worn and it's going to need to be replaced soon.
Right. Yeah, it's one thing I always recommend every buyer do, whether it's a home that is 20 years old, 5 years old,
Right.
recently renovated. I still recommend that they get that inspection done because you never know.
Right.
Um,
Especially, I find there's actually more issues with recently renovated homes because a lot of people, they try to save a dollar here or there. And if they know, they will be selling it after the renovation, they're not going to fix it as well as they would be living there. So they might have some quote unquote handyman work, some handyman wiring, which sometimes could be a safety issue. If there's exposed wires in an attic, which you find a lot of times, it could be potentially a safe fire hazard and things like that. So we just want to keep, make sure that the house is running the way it's supposed to be.
that's a good thing that you mentioned as well, because it's true. If they're just trying to do some quick fix and get it sold, we
Right,
want to make sure that it's done correctly.
right, right.
Mhm. I always
Um,
tell my buyers, even when we write up an offer, it's always contingent on the home inspection,
right,
something satisfactory, or something that, can be worked on or agreed upon before we go into contract.
right,
And I
right.
like one thing I like that you say is that you're a deal maker, not a deal breaker,
Yeah.
right? Because
Well, we try to be. We try to be.
Right.
You know, we don't want to make it too hard. But I don't know if you remember the house that we were looking at. You had a client. I believe she had the roof redone, didn't she? And it
Yes.
was over a $10,000 fix that he wanted.
Yes. In
So that's
Staten
what
Island.
sometimes I'm in an actual difficult position because we want to be a deal maker, right? But we also don't want to be the bad guy in the situation. So, but so it's kind of like a give and take thing as a home inspector. You don't want to be the bad guy, but you also don't want to, how could I say it, be over. I find some home inspectors are, I don't know if dramatic is the right word, but over dramatic, I guess you could say.
Well, then they kind of put a little bit of a scare, right?
Yes.
We don't want to scare people.
Right.
We want to be aware of safety issues, the most important ones, without making people feel like their house is going to fall apart.
Right. Well, obviously, if the house is falling apart, then I would obviously put that in writing. But if it's something cosmetic and it's, yes, there is
Something
an
fixable.
issue with it. Right. Something fixable. Certain inspectors, they'll write a whole page report on this. It might be an uneven riser on a step, and it could be one step. Yes, it is a safety issue. I'm not trying to downplay it's a safety issue, but it's, you also have to explain to them, listen, it could be an easy fix, or if there's an underlying problem, then that's what has to be investigated and inspected.
Right. All right, so let's talk about the areas that you cover. I know we've worked together in Staten Island, we've worked together in Valley Stream.
Yes, I go as far as Long Island. I try to keep it somewhat close, but if need be, I do travel. I do the 5 boroughs: Staten Island, Brooklyn, Manhattan, Bronx, Queens. So yeah, I'm actually trying to get my license for New Jersey as well.
Oh, okay, good to know.
New Jersey is just the next step over.
A lot of good information, and hopefully if somebody's here in New York and they need their inspection done, they're going to call you. However, for anyone listening that's not here or in an area that you service, what would you recommend they look for when they're hiring a home inspector?
Very good question. I feel that they should be looking for an inspector who is informative, who doesn't mind you. I always try to tell a potential buyer, follow me around. Look at, if there's something you want to ask, you could ask me. I've heard questions from, what's this little hole in the wall to, is this supposed to be here? I encourage that because you want your inspector to be not only friendly, but like I said, informative. You want,
right.
This is a big process for a lot of people, a big purchase, and I want them to feel as comfortable as possible with me as an inspector and know that I'm going through all the steps that I'm supposed to be. So I encourage them to follow me around. When I'm looking at a main panel box, the electrical box, it's a lot of wires, it's a lot of confusing, and to a lot of people, it's, it could be overwhelming, and, I'll just try to break it down, what I'm looking at. So, if your inspector is not forthcoming and not telling you what he's doing, he's just going through the motions. And, I always, like I said, I always just try to be as informative as possible, what steps I will be taking and what I'm actually doing during the inspection. So follow your home inspector around the house. It is your house, potentially. So you should know what every corner of the house looks like.
I think that's a good thing to mention, especially for first-time home buyers. So we have a lot of first-time home buyers that aren't really aware of all the different parts, components of the house, especially when you're talking about electrical or boilers, things like that. So one thing I can appreciate from you as a home inspector, having been with you and doing business with you, is that you do take that extra step. You're very patient and you take your time. So if there's a question that comes up, you don't mind taking your time to explain it to the buyer, and then even following up to make sure that they understood what you said.
Right.
Perfect.
Absolutely. Also, after the inspection is complete, it shouldn't be a case closed deal. It's, once I send the inspection over to the client, I encourage them to ask me anything on there. If there's a picture of something that they don't know what the picture is, call up your inspector. And he's working for you essentially. So if there's any questions, especially on the report, hey, listen, I see that you didn't mention this. Is there a reason for that? If there's anything that you don't like, you should always tell your inspector.
Right. Yeah, and I can vouch for you on that, because I have had to talk to you afterwards, even a couple of days after the inspection.
Yes, of course. And like I said,
we're talking about the contract part, and you had no problem, taking a minute to go over it and explaining it or answering questions. That way we can get the right, information put into the contract for our buyer.
Right. I like I said, I try to be as helpful as possible without overstepping my boundaries. I always just try to be informative and helpful.
Perfect. I think we have a lot of good information about your company, about the whole process. I'm going to include your contact information at the end of the video, so that way if anybody has any questions or looking for a home inspector, they can reach you directly, and you can go from there. And if there's any other questions, we'll put our phone numbers and they can call or text us, and we'll get to them as well.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Thank you for your time, Joseph. Have a good day.
Thank you, Natalia.
Hi.
Yes, I will. Thank you again.